Well, we're here today to talk about what's happening across the nation. There's been a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension in the wake of 10 fatal shootings involving police and black men. We're pleased to have with us Pastor Paul Bains of St. Samuel Church in East Palo Alto, also the founder of the police chaplaincy program locally. Pastor Paul, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And also East Palo Alto Police Commander Jeff Liu. We're pleased to have you as well.
Thank you.
We're interested, first of all, in hearing about the perspectives of the community at this point and also the police force locally. On Monday, I should mention, there was a vigil and a dialogue held in East Palo Alto. Many people attended. I think there was upwards of 70 in attendance, spearheaded by Pastor Paul with Jeff in attendance. Tell us a little bit about what you're hearing on the street and what the feelings are on the force right now.
Well, what's actually comforting that just occurred last night, the city council meeting, there were a lot of people that came out to the council meeting in support of the police department, which was really great for us to hear, because so often in this business you hear all the negatives, and with everything going on across the nation, we all get painted with the same brush. But last night's council meeting and also at Pastor Paul's event on Monday, we heard a lot of different perspectives, people that appreciate our police department, appreciate the partnership that we've had with the community. And it really made us feel like all the work that we've been doing over the years of building the foundation and building the relationships has really been paying off. But there is still that bigger picture that we all need to be aware of also, with the dynamics of police-community relations across the country.
Yeah. When there's a crisis like this, it really shows what you've been doing over time, whether there's been a basis of trust and understanding or whether there hasn't been, and what some of the difficulties have been too. Yeah. Pastor Paul, what are you hearing? What are you seeing from your community?
Well, I would say from people of color, primarily the brown and black, young people, they are concerned, they are nervous, they are even fearful. For those who don't have an established relationship with police officers. We have police officers that, ride bikes with our young people, that take our young people out to picnics and invite them to activities, ball games, football games, all that kind of stuff. And so they have established relationships. It's those that don't have, that also buy into either something that's been posted on the television or that they've experienced themselves, to where the negative relationships come up and then they're like, okay, I got to back off here. I can't be a part of this group. So we have to be cognizant as a community that there are both the young people who love to work and be around cops, and then there are those who don't know, and then there are those who are actually fearful because of what they've seen on TV. And so we need to bridge that gap by having more events, more community events with the police, with law enforcement, not just police, but the sheriffs as well, so that they can understand where young people are coming from. Young people can share their voice, they can share their feelings, they can share their experiences. I've had negative experiences with police officers when I was growing up. But I also, as I've grown up, I've learned to understand what the police are doing and the split-second decisions that they have to make to protect themselves, to protect the community. And they don't want to be aggressive, but sometimes people can cause them to be aggressive. And then you have, and this is what I say, I'm sorry, I'm a preacher, I'm going to keep talking here. You have people who, they judge people, just like I can be judged by my skin color, all of us can be judged from whomever. And they have some kids that are adopted, they're mostly Latino, and they call me Uncle Paul. So they're part of my extended family. So I'm having these relationships with them. We're playing basketball, soccer, whatever it may be. Then I came in my uniform, and they backed off. I'm like, what's going on? You're a cop? I said, what does that mean? So I want them to talk. You can't shut young people down. You gotta let them talk and hear their perspective before you make your own decision. I said, so what does that mean? Does that mean something bad or good? And no, but you're a cop. I've been talking to you all this
Right.
time, and
I
we've
had no
done
idea.
things. I said, so let me let you know something. I've had bad experiences with cops, and I've had good experiences with cops. So every cop that you see is not bad. And just like every pastor that you see is not good. Every teacher you see, unfortunately, is not good. Every priest you see, unfortunately, is not good. That's not the majority of them, obviously, but we've had bad experiences in all sectors. And so they said, well, but you're a cop. I said, well, I'm actually a pastor to the cops. So that's really what my role is. And everybody needs help, and everybody needs forgiveness and grace, including me. So, just trying to get them to understand and see it from more than one perspective than what they may hear by one bad experience that doesn't, permeate through everybody's mind that every cop is bad, just like every pastor is good. I just want them to understand that.
It's kind of human nature, isn't it, to sort of want to identify and label this person as such and such, or this person. I know how I should respond to this person because I've got you figured out, and you're one way. But how do you break down that kind of tunnel vision, as it were, when people look at an officer and they've had certain experiences? You don't know what kind of experiences they've had. They, maybe good, maybe bad.
Well, not just the experience that they've personally experienced, but also what they've been taught by older people, older children, their parents in some cases, media,
Yeah.
MTV,
Social
whatever kids
media.
are watching, social media, whatever kids are watching, whatever opinions are being pushed out, and they're absorbing. I've found that a lot of young people take that on, even without having personal experiences themselves. And unfortunately, right now, police in general are painted in a bad light, just based on the uniform itself. Without getting to know the person, I'm already painted one way just because I'm wearing the uniform.
Have you had issues since all of these shootings have taken place with people? Have you seen a change in East Palo Alto in terms of how people treat you? They treat you better, worse overall?
I haven't had any personal experiences, but most of my time is spent in the office anyways. But no, my officers don't treat me any differently. But I haven't heard of any instances where officers have come to me and said, "Hey, I got treated like this." We know that's part of the job. We've come to accept it. We know how to deal with it. But in looking at social media, I have a lot of friends out there, and just looking at like Facebook, for example, seeing what they post. Some of the things that I've seen some friends post, anti-police, and I can't help but think, well, what about me? Is that how you feel about me
Sure.
now?
Yeah.
Even though we have a friendship, is that how you feel about me? Because you feel like that about the police?
I kind of wonder if things are different now, maybe because of social media than they were, say, 10 years ago, or not, or we're just seeing a sort of amplification. I know the media plays a role in amplifying what's going on without saying that, that there isn't a strong underlying distrust or there aren't reasons why there's tension. I'm wondering if we're just in a different era now for some reason.
I would answer that yes and no. Yes, things have changed with community policing, where they are reaching out and trying to understand how can we better get along with our communities, the communities that we serve. So that outreach has been much more extensive and even somewhat comprehensive in the last, I would say, 7 to maybe 10 years. Is there a long way to go? Yes, because the challenge is you're dealing with a few bonehead, and I will say this, bonehead officers that have had very bad tactics, or used very bad tactics, had very bad judgment, and it makes it bad for all officers. And we don't accept what they've done, particularly to people of color. I mean, there's been some atrocities out there. One young person said relationships haven't changed, just technology. Now and I know for a fact that, historically, yes, law enforcement has not been on, people of color in law enforcement has not gotten along. You got people that came out of the South that still were part of the Ku Klux Klan area or white supremacy, whatever you want to call it. that had made it hard for even black and Asian and people of color cops to even be in the police department, okay? Let alone push it out onto the street and abuse their power. But when you get to know the officers here, I don't think there's a city around here that would tolerate any type of officer with that type of mindset. You know, it's me and Jeff here, we can joke about anything. That's the kind of relationship you want to have with a police officer, that you can talk about anything, joke about, well, almost anything, but he can talk to me about anything. His confession is every day, matter of fact. But it's there's still the people buy on sound bites, and that perception becomes reality in the young people's mind because they have a lot of energy, they have a lot of emotion, and they're not going to tolerate what other generations have tolerated in this day and age. They'll get on their phone, they'll videotape it, capture it if they think it's wrong. And I'm not saying that every time that they capture something is wrong, but I'm saying there are times where we can see people have abused their power, whether it's the police department, the pastor, clergy, or the teachers. They've abused that trust that was embodied into them from society.
And that's not a bad thing for us to see that.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's a very powerful tool for getting to the bottom of what's really going on.
Right, and it's a starting point because you're capturing something, but because some people buy on those video bites or those sound bites, they launch off into something until we found, is that person guilty, whomever it is, whatever the situation may be. In this case, we're talking about police and people of color. The slaying of officers, violence begets violence. Violence doesn't end things. It may calm things down for a second because you feel good, but then it's going to come right back at you. So,
Right. Right.
And you guys touched on sound bites and people with video and capturing events. In police work, we have a certain protocol. When things happen, we have an investigation. And on the investigative end, we don't discuss it. We don't talk about it. You guys probably noticed, we don't give a lot of information until the investigation is completely done. Whereas these sound bites, you take them, you put them on social
out
media,
there.
they're gone.
Yeah.
They're out there, and then people act on them, and they base decisions on them, and they pass judgment on them. Where they don't have the full picture, they only have a small bit of information. I don't know whether or not the officer made the right decision, and out of respect for the investigative process, I'm not going to pass judgment on it. If they did wrong, they're going to be held accountable. There's no question. But if they did right, the ball's already out there, judgment's already passed. You can't undo any of that. So it makes it really difficult because if, for example, one of my officers got into a situation and somebody captured a part on social media and blasted it out there, investigation's still going. We don't know whether or not the officer did the right thing, but the bell is rung.
Right, and you're
we
only
can't-
getting part of it, perhaps,
right, and we
too.
can't comment on it. We can't come out and say, well, here's this evidence, here's that evidence. We can't do that. We have to, whoever's investigating it has to do the complete investigation. And when they're done with that, which could take a while, then they have to undo everything that's been done. And that's likely not possible.
That puts you in a difficult position because I'm sure you want to be able to say something.
Well, right. I mean, you want to go out
address
there and
what
scream at the
is-
top of lungs. No, we have this other video that shows that didn't happen, but you can't. I mean, as part of the investigation.
So now we're at a point where you convene this vigil and conversation, the first one. And I'd kind of like to get a sense of what you hope to achieve with that. And that my understanding in being there Monday was this is the first of many that you hope to have. So how do we kind of get that message out? There was certainly lots of love in that room from what I saw. Across different races and ethnicities, which was a really great thing to see. But how do we spread that and reach people who really are, very fearful and don't really have faith in the system?
Yes, there are particularly young people that have lost faith in the system because, again, of a few bonehead cops. All right, and they have a right to be mad. And I tell them, be mad, be angry. Even the Bible says, be angry and sin not. But channel that anger into something positive that will prevent something like this either from occurring in our local community or reoccurring within our country. It's all about reconciliation and restoration. But if we don't acknowledge these atrocities, or if justice is not served properly, I mean, I kind of hate to say this, but if you look at the O.J. Simpson thing, okay, I think that was the wrong decision, myself personally. However, from an African American standpoint, a lot of African Americans feel like, okay, now we finally got one over on the system. You know, they come from that mindset. That doesn't make it right, because we've been abused, we've been falsely accused. You know, people have been serving jail terms for 30 years, and they found out because of DNA, now they're innocent, just because of, again, some bonehead cops. Or it could have been an honest mistake, but most of the time it's bonehead cops. How do we keep this going? Well, the next one, we plan on having more young people there than we had non-young people. I'll say it like that. It was good. It was diverse. We had a lot. You know, we had African American, Latino, Caucasian, middle-aged, and seniors there, and that part was good. We had about 15 youth there. But I call anybody under the age of 40 a young person. So, but the goal is to allow them to speak from where they are, and not to censor them. Let them express their anger. Let them express their positive interactions with law enforcement, all the above, no holds barred. And then let us have a real, honest dialogue. Because if we don't start there, then we have no foundation to build from. Everything will be superficial if we don't really deal with the systemic issues that we need to address in society. And that's dealing with, like we talked about, white privileges, law enforcement privileges, and then some people who like to play the race card where it doesn't even belong. So, you know, let's discuss what's going to make us become healthier. We're better together than we are apart. And the more people realize and understand that, the better off we will be. That's my thinking. That's what we teach at our church. That's what we teach in our nonprofit. And that's why I try to help encourage within the police departments.
Reconciliation is such a difficult thing, I think, for people to engage in. When you feel like there's wrongs and those wrongs haven't been addressed, there's no redress, there's no acknowledgement. I can imagine that there's some people who don't want to let go of that, you know, ever. But
They just say enough is enough. We just can't.
yeah,
Too much has happened, as one woman said.
You did Oscar Grant, you know, with him being handcuffed on his back and getting shot in his back. Okay, there's no excuse for that. You can't, and it looks bad. And the system, you know, the process, and then there's other illustrations too.
There was just one in Miami the other day of a professional who was working with a man who was working with an autistic man, and the man who was helping him was shot in the leg by an officer. There's photos going around on the internet with the man laying down with his hands in the air. So it's a really scary scenario when you look at that. And he claims that when he asked the officer, "Why did you shoot me?" he said, "I don't know." So that kind of brings up, there was something that came out, there was a 17-year-old that I interviewed, and she was really talking about sort of, I think she meant preconceived notions, but she talked about expectations being different for different groups of people. And she said that she feels that people, sometimes, you know, if somebody gets shot because, yes, there is fear, but she didn't believe that, and we don't know what the reality is, but she didn't believe that the officer was in fear of his life. He was in fear of an idea about a large black man. And so I think that's also, you know, on the flip side, it also has to do with, and Jeff, you've talked about this too, about, you know, the officers and how, and expectations that people have, or maybe they don't know how to behave around police. And a situation can escalate because you have to confront someone who seems to be doing something wrong, and they have a certain idea about you.
seems like what we're talking about is preconceived notions of the other person, and lack of opportunity to actually, or desire, to see the full picture, like what's really going on here, what are the nuances beyond that soundbite, beyond that video clip, or what have you.
How do we broadcast that to people? How do we make it so that are there things that as a department you can do, or you go to schools or things like that? How do you reach to have people see understand what the police expectation is of a person when they are stopped, when they have to be stopped, and also the person's expectation of officers?
Well, I mean, I think it even starts right here, just getting the word out. Don't be too quick to pass judgment. I saw the clip of the Florida thing this morning, and again, that's one person's perspective. I'd like to see what the rest of the investigation shows, but also be willing to go with the program. If an officer stops you and they don't have a reason to, there's a process for that. Every department has a complaint process where, believe me, I mean, there are plenty of people who can say there are plenty of people that don't have their job because the complaint was
complaints.
sustained. So we don't want that in our profession because it makes us all look bad. And it's not what we signed up for, and that's not why we hired the person, and that's not what we hired them to do. So let us know if there's some wrongdoing. We will take care of it. I think Pastor Paul is a good example of how to behave also, because I know we talk a lot. But if somebody gets stopped by the police, do what they tell you to do. If you feel it's wrong, record it. You can absolutely do that. And then file a complaint, give us a copy of the video, and we'll follow up on it. And if they're doing wrong, they'll be held accountable.
Does recording, if you're taking out your cell phone or what have you, just aggravate the situation, though? I know
It depends what you do with it. If you just say, hey, I'm going to record this and just record respectfully, it's fine. But if you're over here shoving it in the face, making threats along
Right.
with it, it's going to aggravate the situation.
Right.
It's going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, if you're sitting there shoving the video in somebody's face or in an officer's face saying, I'm going to have your badge, I'm going to get you fired, you're just stopping me because of this, because of that, whatever, you're not listening and you're not doing what the officer's telling you to do.
Yeah.
So if the officer stops you, just do what they say.
Okay.
And then if you feel it's wrong, file a complaint with the agency. We'll take it, we'll investigate it. And if there's video, there's no disputing. So
And body-worn cameras are coming more into use around now.
that's
right,
my
as well.
project, yeah.
And see, I'm in favor of body-worn cameras because it helps protect the officer, it helps protect the community, because you get to see everything visible. To me, the more visible things are, and we have to be careful though, but again, we can't take sound bites out of the video and just pass judgment on that sound bite. But we have to look at it from conception all the way to closure. And that way you have a full rounded perspective of what's going on. And then, the community actually needs to educate themselves on what law enforcement protocols are, just a little overview. I think they should teach in school, in high school and junior high school, rights. Judge Cordell came to East Palo Alto and we did a Know Your Rights thing. So that way when young adults get stopped, particularly people of color, they know what they can do and what they can't do. Because if they know their rights, then you feel more confident about yourself. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be freaking out what have you, because I know this is what you cannot do to me as law enforcement, and I know what I should not do to you. So to me it's a double-edged sword double-edged sword, not maybe a double sword, but it's a double positive that help equip the young people so that they don't live in fear and they don't allow themselves to be abused, whether it's law enforcement or anybody else.
Can we talk a little bit about community policing? What is that? What does that look like? Is it individual one-on-one, or is it, do you meet with groups of citizens?
Community policing is not just a program. It's not just an event. It's a philosophy. It's a
Okay.
concept, and it's a way of doing the job.
Okay.
I preach to all the officers that we have hired. We fired 8 in the last year.
Wow.
I sit down and meet with each and every single one of them and tell them my expectations. Go out there and meet people. Get to meet the community that you're serving. Get to know everybody that you possibly can, and build that relationship. That relationship, to me, is community policing. Whether or not you take them bike riding, which we do during the Fit Zone program, whether or not we're doing the clean zones, going up and cleaning the community, or I'm just driving down the street, I see you, I stop, I say hi, see how are you, how are the kids, how's school, how are your grades, what can I do to help you? That's community policing. It's not just a
Relationship building.
program, it's not one officer, it's a philosophy. That to me is community policing.
You shared a story at the Vigil that Sue wrote about how you came to, it was a preschool event, and there was some dangerous situation there. Can you share that again?
It was a situation where two individuals got into a conflict, and during the altercation that turned physical, one person got stabbed. So we responded to a call of a stabbing at a preschool or elementary, kindergarten age graduation. Nothing but kids and families gathered around, and when I showed up, I found the person in the crowd. He had a gigantic knife. I mean, gigantic. Not a fishing story. It was big. But he sees me, walks towards me, he pulls the knife out. For most officers, for just about all officers, that is a take your gun out and point it at the person and tell him to drop the gun. I recognized him. I've known him for years from just being out in the community. And also everything behind him was nothing but innocent, families and children and everything. So didn't even touch my gun. I just said, hey, drop the knife. He knew me. We had that relationship, so he threw it down. And then he got himself on the ground and everything went fine. Say 95% of the people there didn't even know we were there, which is, and that to me is the ideal situation, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Sure.
And if he wanted to, he could have decided not to go with our program. He could have said, no, I'm not going to do it. And it would have been a really different situation. It would have been bad for everybody. But luckily, we had that relationship, and that's where it pays off.
Yeah.
That's one of the areas where it pays off.
Yeah. Pastor Paul, you were going to say something?
If you want to build a relationship with anybody, you have to be intentional. And so that's why, like we tell people in the church, you got to go outside the four walls. It's great that we come together and we meet and we have a good time in service, but you got to go outside the four walls. The homeless person that you drove by getting to church, let's maybe stop. Maybe not that day, but another time when you see someone, help them, build a relationship, get to know them. Don't just judge them. Don't just think they're on drugs. And we had a youth summit where we had over 400, almost 400 people attend about 4 years ago. It was a partnership between the community and the East Palo Alto Police Department. But the other departments, supported it as well. And we did gang awareness, gang education. We did parent education and things of that nature. And then we had the fishbowl where we had the officers that they were out of uniform. And so we had it where the kids got to know the officers and like, oh yeah, that guy's cool. That guy. Matter of fact, some of the officers are tatted up. Now I'm not saying that officers should be tatted up, but some of them are, but they have to keep them covered. But the kids built a relationship. Then we told them, oh, those are police officers. What? But they built a relationship. And so then, oh, okay, well, everything's cool. They're still cool.
Yeah.
It's the uniform that sometimes separates us from building relationships. Now on the cop side, when I see cops that, you get cops in here, they want to be Lone Rangers their first 5 years. And I said, you're not going to last. When I do orientation, you won't last. You can't be a Lone Ranger out here thinking that everybody that wears blue or red or wears a certain color or their pants are dropping is a bad kid or a bad person or a member of a gang. And so, that mindset has to be ingrained and taught to the police officers that are coming up. Because they're the ones that are out there. They want to change the world, just like get a new job. You want to change the world with that new job. Same thing with the cops, but they have to learn how that we don't judge, don't pass judgment on them. And there is profiling that does happen, but don't take the profile outside of that specific area and apply it to everybody. If it's a known person that looks this particular way, and he dresses or she dresses this way. Just because someone else dresses that way, that's not the victim. Don't apply it to that situation. So it's a learning process on all sides. I'll say it like that.
Yeah. Jeff, you've been on the force since 2000 in East Palo Alto, and I'm wondering if right now, this month, this year, there are any greater concerns on the force than there have been in the previous 16 years that you've been on the force. Are things any different now, or what do you? What's the conversation about?
I wouldn't say there are really concerns right now. I mean, right now we have a great chief, we have a great staff, a lot of officers that want to do the right thing and have clearly shown that they've been doing the job right and building those relationships. And last night it kind of showed, and it was very nice to hear, frankly, that we do have support from the community, and the people that we're working for appreciate the partnership that we've built. So concerns on the national level, yes. Safety concerns, absolutely. Being targeted because of the uniform, it needs to be on everybody's mind. And that's a absolute concern for me. I'm in charge of everybody in patrol. That's all the officers that show up in uniform on day in and day out, daytime, nighttime, 24/7. I have a tough time being at peace and just thinking that, I don't know about at peace, but I have a hard time relaxing and being able to not worry about who I have out there working. I'm concerned all the time about what if something like Dallas happens to one of my officers? What if something like Baton Rouge happens, and one of my officers gets hurt? I was the investigating officer for Officer Rich May's murder. I experienced it firsthand and lived it over and over through the trial process. And Sue knows, she was there every day for court. So it's especially sensitive to me. It was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and I don't want to go through that again. Now, and back then I didn't have the responsibility that I do now, but now that's my officer. That's my guy, my gal. That's my officer. I don't want to see him get even a paper cut, let alone, ambushed or killed.
That's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it's daunting, yeah.
But there are ways, it seems like there are probably some ways around, or to reduce that tension is through communication and a way of constantly putting out those ideas so that the message is always out there again and again and again. Or there's some things between the two of you that you see proactively doing to keep that message going and widening the circle of people that you're able to reach?
Yes, it's the interaction. I mean, it doesn't have to be named under community policing. It's just interaction. When you see a cop, walk up to them, talk to them. How you doing? Ask them how they're doing. When cops see kids, hey, how you doing? Not in an aggressive manner or what have you, but in a very approachable manner. But it doesn't just. It's not just cops and people of color. It's people of color and Caucasians as well. Let's get to know each other. Let's not just judge each other because my eyes look different or I speak with an accent or my color skin is different. Let's not make these assumptions, this is how I am or how I'm going to be or how I'm going to act or respond to you. The ethnic differences that we have, to me, is our strength. Like I said, all of us is not as strong as, none of us is as strong as all of us. If we can just be more united at approaching and addressing problems in our community and celebrating together, have a picnic together, whatever it may be, just get to know one another, and then we can dispel some of these prejudices that have been taught to us from kids or that we've seen on television. And I just think that will bring our community much more health and healing.
One of the things that I remember when I first moved to East Palo Alto 40 years ago was being approached by children who were touching my skin and my hair. And they were like marveling at me because they'd never touched a white person before. And I said, well, yeah, it's just like your skin. And they said, no, it can't be because we're black and you're white. And that really just struck me so deeply, the divide that was there, that was so ingrained from such an early age. It made me cry. And now I think we're seeing these things with social media too, and I got a sense of this one at the Vigil, is that there were a lot of Caucasian people there. And they are outraged by what they've seen. And on all sides, the shooting of the police officers being shot, the shooting of men of color, young men of color, just what's happening societally. And some people even said, I feel guilty. I'm not doing enough. So, I think that there's an awakening perhaps that's starting to go on again, since the civil rights movement in the 60s? We seeing something broader starting to happen?
I think you're spot on. I believe there is. Earlier that day, I spoke to about me and another pastor, Pastor Paul Smith. This was orchestrated by Rob Schultz, a Caucasian pastor from Hope 101, and we spoke to pastors from Redwood City to San Jose, about 25 of them, and they were all very sincere about what's going on, the social injustices that they see that's going on in society. And we have to be careful though, that we don't have what I call the Jesus complex, whether you're white, black, Mexican, Asian, whatever, and put all of that guilt upon yourself. Let's look at, okay, where is this coming from? Yes, there have historically, I know my people, we were brought over as slaves. Okay, so we know that those atrocities everybody knows, and some people connect the atrocities today to those atrocities of the past. And there are some connections there. But we still got to be careful that we feel that we're the only ones that can make a difference. As an individual, no. But collectively, yes. And it can start with just a simple conversation, a simple coming of minds just to talk. Whether we agree or not, that's one thing, but at least we can have some understanding. And as an African American person, I appreciate the empathy that I am seeing from people, because there are times like, does anybody see what we're going through? Does anybody see the wrongdoings that's happening in society? And I'm not just isolating it to law enforcement. I'm just talking about, like women, the glass ceiling, and look at how people are not being hired within the tech companies and what have you. There's not a lack of talent. Because there's social capital in peoples of color community, like I don't know what. But what are the efforts being made to reach them? There's some cultural understandings that people are not adhering to. So just because this is your way of doing it, that doesn't mean that maybe I'm understanding your way of doing it. Maybe you need to understand my way of doing some things. And that diversity and that collective thinking can make a better product, can give a better service in my rule book. That's just, my opinion.
It's all of us together, and not just individuals. We're unfortunately running out of time at this point. I wanted to just ask if you had any final thoughts, maybe where we need to go from here, or things that you want people just to simply know or think about as we consider this issue further in our private lives and with our friends and family.
I feel like communication is paramount. People need to be willing to talk to each other and communicate, share their feelings, and respect other people's different opinions and feelings. But as a community, we need to be in the mindset that we move forward together, we communicate with each other, and we change things together. Rather than all this fighting, fighting doesn't do anything for us. We work together, we engage in dialogue, we work together as a community despite gender, ethnicity, throw all that out the window. Just talk to people as people, get to know them as people, and don't be too quick to judge somebody.
Yeah. Good
Hear 'em
thoughts.
I would say that in order for healing to take place in any type of relationship, there has to be acknowledgement. If I tell my wife I did something wrong to my wife, I offended her in some shape, form, or fashion, if I don't acknowledge my wrongdoing, then guess what? No matter what I say, no matter what I do, is superficial because there's no foundation there. And so we have to all acknowledge our role, our part in whatever that we've done wrong or been found guilty to have done wrong as well, or thought we've done wrong. We should acknowledge it, then we can build a solid foundation. So that part is to me, is critical in any type of relationship building. But just get to know one another. Let's not prejudge.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the efforts that you are both putting into now to rebuild that trust, to address issues that are plaguing our cities and our nation as well. And thank you for being here, Pastor Paul Bains and Commander Jeff Liu. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
To keep up on the news in Palo Alto, go to paloaltoonline.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at Palo Alto Weekly. That's it for this week.